Hello and welcome to the July NMSS tournament. This particular format is a bit of a new thing. It was suggested by one of our own competitors and one of the bigger names of the community, Camo5. This is a Skeleton Sorcerer style tournament, which is where I created a ship that's called the Skeleton, which you can see here. And everyone had to build their ship from this skeleton. So all of the ships are kind of going to look very similar, but the weapons loadout, you can tell, is very different between them. I'd also like to have a quick shout out to our first time competitors, Lapsap now, who you've probably seen on YouTube at this point. If not, I'll be sure to include a link to his channel in the description below. But he's one of the bigger names in the community. If you're a part of the NMSS tournaments and you haven't heard of Laps, then I'd be very surprised. We've also got two other new competitors, Ludoshi with NeedsMoreDaka and BrizzleBreh with FreshKitchen. These two are apparently friends and are looking forward to seeing their fleets fight each other, so I'm glad because they were both first-time competitors, they both got placed in the neophyte pool, and so they in fact get to see their wish. So now let's get this show started. So up first we have Laps up against Ludoshi. Now I haven't had much of a chance to actually look at any of these ships, so let's see what we've got here. You can see Laps is using the exterior of the hull to plant mine layers and shield projectors, along with plenty of defense cannons. Looks like he's got some proton beams, some burst lasers. I'm seeing quite a few torpedoes here on the flanks and some rockets to go along with them. A pretty missile-heavy layout, but it should be pretty interesting. With enough saturation, a lot of missiles will overwhelm PD pretty effectively. His ships, you can see, are also not quite homogeneous. He's got these guys here with mortars, and their shields are on the interior, and I think railguns on the outside. These guys have antimatter cannons with some proton beams flanking them and proton swords on the sides. So all three of Lap's ships are actually different. On the other side, we've got Ludoshi over here. You can see he's using a great deal of missiles and some drone launchers, so he's going to want to have this ship keep its distance and fight at range. But at the same time, he doesn't really have a whole lot of reverse thrust, so I feel like these guys are going to get a little closer than would otherwise be optimal. And I think his fleet is his fleet isn't quite homogeneous. He's got 4 of these missile guys, and you can see he's got 2 here, where he's using a shitload of autocannons, which are really good high DPS weapons, although their range and projectile velocity is a little low. So these guys are going to need to close, which they should do pretty well with all those with all that forward thrust. But back to the show at hand. You can see that both fleets are actually trying to close into close range pretty exclusively, which is going to go very well for those autocannons, but the missiles, I think, are probably not going to get the best of the exchanges against Laps's ships. However, Ludoshi's off to a very strong start with taking out one of Laps's ships immediately. Because Laps only has 3 ships, any loss that he suffers is a very significant loss, so losing one of his ships in the first few seconds brought his fleet down very significantly, and Ludoshi takes round 1. Oh, right. I'll fix the chat box here while the round is still going. I think we're probably going to see very similar in this round, honestly. The fleet from Ludoshi seems to be bringing a lot of close range damage, and that is proving very problematic for Laps's fleet to successfully manage. Meanwhile, the drones and missiles are keeping pressure up, which doesn't allow the ships to regenerate or repair themselves, and helping keep the shields down as well. And it's looking like Ludoshi's going to take the first match. So next up we have Laps against BrizzleBreh, who, let's see what he's got real quick. So he has 2 ships. They're homogeneous designs. He's got antimatters on the flanks, missiles, railguns. He's using some shields, several of them actually. He's got the 2 station shields and the 2 forward shields, which the station shields add a good chunk of health, but I don't know that they're really even cost effective even in this environment. Generally speaking, armor is better than shields, especially for Terrans, but with this format, you weren't allowed to add extra armor to the exterior of the ship, which kind of denied players the ability of building giant blocks of armor to begin with. And as a result, shields become relatively more important but I do think the 2 station shields are going to be a bit of an inefficient investment. They're just extraordinarily costly shields. As you can see, Laps taking round 1. And moving into round 2, you can see the shield's getting stripped off very quickly. A lot of damage output coming from Laps' ships, and no matter how many shields you put on, they can only take so much damage. And Laps takes round 2 as well. So moving on, we've got Laps up against Kamikaze Dalek. Kamikaze Dalek is a veteran of the tournament, but he got into the Neophyte pool because he submitted very early. You can see he's definitely focusing more heavily on some ships than others. This guy just has a few little plasma cannons. This one down here has a mortar, some defense cannons, and 1 plasma cannon. But these guys I think are going to be the mainstays of his fleet, with the antimatters. Kamikaze Dalek, when he first showed up in the NMSS tournaments, one of the things that did impress me was his ability to get the ship to correctly use the antimatters. And so let's see if these guys continue that tradition. And you can see very much 2 of his ships were essentially designed to be damage sponges and throwaways. And a couple of good mortar hits you can see are just devastating the interiors of Laps' ships. Between the antimatters and I think he's got some mortars in there as well. Between the 2, they are causing all sorts of harm to Laps' interior. This ship is small enough that mortars are a very devastating weapon because of their very large slash range. So a hit to basically anywhere on the exterior of the ship would cause you to lose internals very quickly. And you can see Kamikaze Dalek capitalizing on that pretty efficiently. Although Laps doing much better this round. Hey, Aposhi. However, despite getting off to a stronger start, Kamikaze Dalek's fleet managing to hold it together, pull it back, and it looks like they're going to be taking round 2 as well. And Dalek takes round 2. So up next we have Laps against Xturf 7. Xturf 7 is another veteran of the community, and again submitted really early. Xturf 7 has thrown in pretty hard with the proton swords, I believe, fleet-wide. You can see this guy's got 8 of them. Actually, they're all a homogeneous design. So he's got the proton swords, some defense cannons in the middle, making this nice little zigzag pattern, and a railgun in the back. The railgun in the back should fool some of the AIs into thinking that the ship has a longer engagement range, and forcing the AI to flub its way into close combat with Xturf's ships. But we'll see how they pan out. The proton swords are the shortest ranged weapon the Terrans have, but they're also incredibly high damage. As you can see, just a few seconds of uptime on a target is enough to completely cut through all of the armor. And Xturf 7 takes round 1. And the mine layers you can see from Laps doing absolute work on the initial charge. Mine layers being another weapon that has a very large splash radius, but the damage and the fact that they don't have any projectile velocity is generally a problem in a lot of tournaments. But in this particular matchup, where Xturf 7 is forced to charge in, the mines can actually be quite a pretty potent deterrent. But I don't think Laps' fleet is getting enough time to really saturate the field before Xturf 7 is able to close in and get those proton swords on target. Once the proton swords start lighting up, you can see the Terran armor just does not hold up to that kind of damage output. I don't know that any armor really can, though. This last ship from Laps, though, trying to be a hero. Staying just on the edge of danger. Still holding it together though. Very impressive last stand out of this guy. But I'm wondering how long before it's just because Extra 7 only needs one ship to close in for a few seconds. So Laps' ship has to basically play the rest of this round almost perfectly. And he's been doing very well so far. You can see he's almost caught up to the score difference, and he regenerated the bulk of his armor. Or, well, all of his armor and the bulk of his interior. This last ship just might pull this off. Oh, wait, nope, never mind. One of Extra 7 ships got up close from behind, and you can see how quickly everything goes to hell. So now we have Ludoshi up against BrizzleBreh. As I mentioned before, these two know each other in real life, and we're looking forward to watching each other fight. But I think for BrizzleBreh, unfortunately, those autocannons are just going to be too much. As I mentioned before, the damage from the autocannons is actually pretty impressive, and with as many as Ludoshi brought to the field, you can see they just tear through the armor, almost like the proton swords, except with longer range. Some very serious firepower coming out of Ludoshi's fleet. And up next we have Ludoshi up against Kamikaze Dalek. Now, Dalek's fleet is a bit more longer ranged for the most part, but you can see the autocannon ships from Ludoshi are very good on that initial charge. I'm wondering how that's actually going to pan out, because they have to continually get into range if they don't kill initially. And the ships from Ludoshi seem to have a bit of a maneuverability problem. Although coming from the back they're doing pretty well, but the autocannon ships you can see are now struggling to get close to the target again. Ludoshi does seem to be getting the better hand of getting the better of Kamikaze Dalek's fleet here though. The drones and missiles being a bit of a problem, as you can see for the one ship from Kamikaze Dalek. Now, it's entirely possible Ludoshi's ship here is going to go down, depending on how quickly the rest of the fleet can realign. The constant pressure from the missiles and the drones is a really good way to stop enemy ships from regenerating. And even if the ships themselves aren't that much necessarily responsible for the damage itself, being able to stop your enemy from regenerating makes all of your damage much more sticky. And sticky damage is really what kills. Dalek ships seem to be working together much more effectively this time around though. You can see the cluster of antimatter cruisers sitting there in the distance, or sitting there off toward the left side of the screen, all focusing a single target. And the antimatters, they're very long range and very high alpha, relatively speaking, but they are also very expensive weapons, which is a huge drawback in any sort of point-limited tournament. I'm feeling like, though, as long as Dalek's 3 ships continue to focus like this, they'll do very well. And you can see what I mean about the ship from Ludoshi having a difficult time reorienting. The autocannon ship in the bottom right spent a very long time just running around, not actually engaging anything. It was actually kind of flying away from the enemy, which wasn't really helping it. It was out of range anyway. Though once they do get those autocannons in range, they do some very serious damage. But I feel like with a bit more steering in the toward the front of the ship, he might have been able to keep much better uptime on targets. And that would probably dramatically improve the autocannon ships. He'd probably have to give up some autocannons to be able to afford the thrusters, but that might also let him shed some generators and just be less expensive in general. And this still could very well go either way. Dalek has the advantage right now, but well, no, never mind. Dalek's pretty much got this one in the bag. Because of the damage output of these autocannon ships and how quickly they can destroy an opponent, it only takes a couple seconds of mistakes out of the AI to completely destroy one of the chassis. And as a result, even though Dalek had 2 ships, as long as Ludoshi had those autocannons on the field, all it would take is just a brief mistake on the part of the AI, and the autocannon ship would have been able to kill those 2 pretty quickly. Really good showing from Ludoshi though. A first time competitor doing very well against some of our more experienced so far. I'm interested to see this next matchup though, Ludoshi against Exderp 7. Both fleets rely on close range combat. Ludoshi has a range advantage, but Exderp has a damage advantage. So between the two, they both want to get up close and brawl, and you can see just how quickly those proton beams just cut through everything. And it looks like Exderp 7 is going to be taking round 1. And honestly, given the fleet designs, I don't know how much room there is for anything different to happen here in round 2 as well. And this is sort of the advantage of efficiency over brute power. Because Exderp 7, both of these fleets fit within a 16k budget, but Exderp 7 was able to bring 9 ships, each with this sort of close-range damage output, whereas Ludoshi, because he was using the autocannons, they do a lot of damage, but they're not as efficient as the proton beams, or the proton swords. You can see Exderp 7 ships also maneuver a good bit better, and as a result are spending more time on target. Ooh, that was close though for Ludoshi's ship. Almost got to those generators. But now that Ludoshi's ship is facing the correct direction, things are going a little bit better for it. His last ship's trying to be a hero, and it might just pull it off, honestly. It's been very close to dying a couple of times, but it is still here. And Exderp 7 wins the match. So next up we have BrizzleBreh against Kamikaze Dalek. And both of these fleets are kind of using a bit of a more long-range loadout, which the station shields would hold up a little bit better, but ultimately there's still a lot of damage on the field. And because of that, the greater ship count going in favor of Kamikaze Dalek I think gives him a pretty big advantage. It's a very heavy loadout though on, or a very antimatter heavy loadout on both sides. Trying to rely on that long-range alpha strike. And Kamikaze Dalek takes the match. So next up we have BrizzleBreh up against Exderp 7. And here I'm fully expecting Exderp to win this one. His damage output and engage speed is just too high. BrizzleBreh's ships are unfortunately not going to be able to escape at all. And there you have it. Excerpt 7 wins round 1, and I don't think this one's going to go a whole lot different. Some good hits on some of those explosives, though. Really crippling one of Excerpt 7's ships for a little while, but Excerpt 7 takes the match. And last up we have Dalek up against Excerpt 7. So there's a lot actually hinging on this match. Right now, Ludoshi and Excerpt 7 both have 3 wins, so if Dalek wins this, we'll have a 3-way tie for first and second, who will, in this, the first and second from each of the subpools will be promoted to the champion pool. If Dalek wins this, then he will also have 3 wins, and we'll have a 3-way tie. Although if Excerpt 7 wins this, then Excerpt 7 and Ludoshi will be moving on to the champion pool. And Excerpt taking round 1. I'm actually kind of rooting for Excerpt 7 here because I don't feel like doing tiebreaker stuff. I think it's a pretty sound choice. Dalek out to a very strong round 2 though. His fleet's seeming to do a lot better in round 2 than it's been doing in round 1. Which is pretty interesting. The AI, I don't think it really behaves different between rounds, but it does spawn the ships in different locations, and that can often have a pretty big effect on deterministic AI choices. And Excerpt 7 ships really rely on kind of swarming a target, because Kamikaze Dalek ships are pretty quick, but the AI only focuses on the nearest target. So you can see there it just backed right into one of Excerpt 7's ships, tried to turn around and backed into the other. And doing that is really good for Excerpt 7 and really bad for Kamikaze Dalek. And other than outnumbering your opponent, there's very few ways of mitigating that effect of the AI. And Excerpt 7 takes the match. So we've got Excerpt 7 and Ludoshi moving on to the champion pool. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.